before there were emperors, before there were legions, before the Colosseum roared with 50,000 voices, before light poured through a hole in the sky, before daggers found a dictator on the Senate floor, before stone arches carried water across mountain valleys, before barbarians climbed the walls, before the ruins grew silent and the vines crept back, before a single gold coin spun in the dark with a dead emperor's face, there was just a river, a handful of hills, and one man with a plow drawing a line in the dirt. That line became a city. That city became an empire. That empire lasted 1,200 years. 7 hills above a bend in the Tiber. Dense forest. Morning mist. No roads. No walls. No name. A she-wolf found 2 abandoned boys and refused to let Rome die before it had even begun. The Tiber wound through the hills like a promise, and Romulus took a plow and carved a line into the earth and said, "Inside this line is Rome." Rome's first citizens were nobody special. Shepherds, outcasts, wanderers with nowhere else to go. That was always the point. And so they built the walls with their hands and raised the temples with their backs and debated everything in a Senate chamber carved from nothing. Romulus stood before his people as their first king. Not born to power, chosen by it. War turned into handshake. Enemy became neighbor. Rome learned early, conquer first, absorb second. While kings ruled, farmers fed the city. The plow was as Roman as the sword. Romulus vanished. No body, no tomb, no explanation. Just gone. Into the storm, into the myth. 6 more kings followed, each one adding a layer. They built sewers before they built theaters. Because the Romans knew civilization starts underground. The forum came alive. Buy, sell, debate, argue, pray. The beating heart of a city finding its rhythm. The Etruscans taught them art and culture and sophistication. And Rome absorbed every lesson. Then came Tarquin the Proud. The name says everything. And in 509 BC the people rose. The last king fled, and a republic was born. For the first time, no single man held all the power. 2 consuls, 1 year, then out. 12 laws on bronze tablets placed in the public square so even the poorest citizen could point and say, "That is my right." The legion took shape, disciplined, relentless, built not on bravery alone but on system and structure and trust. The poor climbed the Aventine Hill and sat down and said, "Give us a voice or watch the city run itself." Cincinnatus was plowing his field when the messenger arrived. "Rome needs you as dictator." He saved the city in 15 days and went back to his farm, and the Romans never forgot that. Then 390 BC and the Gauls came and burned Rome to the ground and sat on the senators' chairs and laughed. And Rome rebuilt faster and angrier than before, the Servian wall rising like a clenched fist, expanding city by city until all of Italy fell under one eagle. Sacred geese saved the Capitoline Hill in the night, because that is the kind of story Rome tells about itself. Via Appia, 300 miles of straight stone cutting through Italy. All roads lead to Rome, this is where that began. Then came the elephants, Pyrrhus of Epirus crossing into Italy with beasts the Romans had never seen. The legions broke and panicked and ran, and came back. Pyrrhus won every battle. Rome won the war. 264 BC. Rome controlled all of Italy, and across the water, a rival was watching. Carthage, the greatest naval power in the Mediterranean. Rome had no navy. Rome had never needed a navy. Rome built one anyway. They copied a captured Carthaginian warship plank by plank while training soldiers to row on dry land, and within months Rome had a fleet. Then a boy stood before an altar and his father said, "Swear that you will be Rome's enemy forever." His name was Hannibal Barca, and he meant every word. His army gathered in Spain. Africans, Spaniards, Gauls, Numidian cavalry, 37 war elephants. Every enemy Rome had ever made marching together under one general. He crossed the Pyrenees in burning summer heat. He crossed the Rhone where the elephants had to be floated on earth-covered rafts to trick them into thinking they were still on land. Then the Alps. November. Snow. Avalanches. Men freezing where they stood. Half his army died in those mountains. The other half emerged, looking for blood. 218 BC. The nightmare had begun. The river Trebia in winter, an icy ambush, the current red by noon. Lake Trasimene. Fog, narrow path, screaming from everywhere at once. 15,000 Romans in 3 hours. Hannibal marched south and the farms burned behind him and all of Italy trembled. Fabius Maximus watched and waited and said, "Do not fight him. Starve him. Exhaust him." Rome called him a coward. Rome was wrong. August 2nd, 216 BC. The plain of Cannae. 86,000 Romans marched onto that field confident they would end this, and Hannibal surrounded every single one of them. And 50,000 Romans died in a single afternoon. And military academies still study that battle today. The Senate met in silence. Someone proposed peace. Rome said no. Then a young officer named Scipio looked at the maps and saw what nobody else had seen. Don't fight Hannibal in Italy. Fight him at home. And Roman ships landed on the shores of North Africa, and suddenly Carthage was on the defensive and Hannibal had to come home. 202 BC. The Battle of Zama. The greatest general of the ancient world met the man who had spent his entire career studying him. Scipio won.
Rome exhaled.
73 BC. The ludus at Capua. Inside these walls men were trained to die for someone else's entertainment. And one man decided he was done. His name was Spartacus, a Thracian, a slave, a gladiator who remembered freedom. 78 men walked out with kitchen knives and burning rage, and Rome's worst nightmare began. They armed themselves with whatever they could carry. On Mount Vesuvius an army grew around him. Tens of thousands, then 60,000. Every slave, every forgotten person, every invisible human being. That Rome's prosperity was built upon standing together armed and unbeaten. Rome sent militia. The militia came back in pieces. He trained them, drilled them, turned rage into a weapon. The plantations burned. Masters fled on horseback. For 2 years the south of Italy belonged to Spartacus. Then Rome sent its real legions. Marcus Crassus built a wall 40 miles long across the toe of Italy to trap them. The pirate Spartacus had paid for freedom, took Rome's money, and sailed away without him. Spartacus killed his own horse so he could not retreat and charged the Roman lines on foot. And his body was never found. 6,000 crosses lined the road from Capua to Rome, 120 miles. And Rome left them there for months so that every traveler entering the city would understand what rebellion cost. And the world never forgot. He was born into Rome's oldest blood, ambitious beyond reason, brilliant beyond measure. His name was Gaius Julius Caesar. Pirates captured him once. He told them their ransom was too low. He also told them he would come back and kill them all. And he did exactly that because Caesar always kept his promises, especially the terrifying ones. 3 men, 1 secret deal: Caesar, Pompey, Crassus. Between them they controlled Rome while the Senate talked. He rose through Roman politics like a flame through dry wood. 58 BC. He took his legions into Gaul, into the unknown, into the war that would make him immortal. The Helvetii, the Germans, a timber bridge across the Rhine built in 10 days. White cliffs and gray water, and Britain, a land no Roman had ever conquered. British chariots tearing down the beach while Caesar's soldiers jumped from ships into chest-deep water and fought anyway. Then Alesia, the greatest siege in the ancient world. 2 rings of walls facing inward and outward, engineering so precise it borders on madness. 250,000 Gallic warriors attacking from outside, while Caesar held both walls simultaneously. Vercingetorix rode out in full armor and dismounted before Caesar and laid his weapons at his feet. And Gaul was over. 1 million killed, 1 million enslaved. Caesar added it to his letter to the Senate like a footnote. Then he stood at the Rubicon River on a cold January night in 49 BC with 1 legion behind him and the whole of Rome in front of him. And he stood at the bank, and he looked at the water, and he crossed it. The die is cast. Rome fell to him without a sword being drawn because Pompey fled and the Senate scattered and Italy opened like a gate. He destroyed Pompey at Pharsalus in Greece. He arrived in Egypt where Pompey's severed head was presented to him as a gift, and Caesar wept because he had wanted victory, not this. In Egypt he met Cleopatra, smuggled to him inside a rolled carpet, unrolling herself directly into his life and into history. The Library of Alexandria burned during the chaos of that war, and centuries of human knowledge went up in a single night of careless fire. Caesar returned to Rome as dictator for life. Flower petals in the streets. The crowd loved him, and the Senate whispered in the corridors. Even at the peak of absolute power, he sat with scrolls and calculations, reforming the calendar, trying to fix time itself. At the festival of Lupercalia, Mark Antony offered Caesar a crown, and Caesar refused 3 times in public. But some senators didn't believe the performance. In the shadows of the corridors, 60 men met with daggers hidden under their togas. Brutus and Cassius in the darkness, men Caesar called friends. The knife cuts deepest from the closest hand. 60 senators, 60 daggers. The wife Calpurnia dreamed of blood the night before and begged him to stay home, and Caesar almost listened. Almost. A soothsayer caught his eye in the crowd. Beware the Ides of March. Caesar walked past him. March 15th, 44 BC. The theater of Pompey. Caesar arrived and stepped into history. They surrounded him slowly, smiling, pretending to present a petition, and the trap snapped shut. Casca struck first, and then they all moved at once. 23 wounds, 23 men who had eaten at his table and called him friend. And through the blood and the chaos, Caesar looked across the room and found the one face he had not expected and had always feared, and said the 4 words that every human being born in every century since has heard, and pulled his toga over his face, and fell at the feet of Pompey's statue, and let go. The conspirators walked out into the forum with bloody hands, expecting applause, and instead Mark Antony climbed to the rostra and held up Caesar's blood-stained toga and spoke to the crowd in a voice that climbed from grief to fury, and Rome caught fire. The Republic was over. They just didn't know it yet. An 18-year-old student opened a letter and discovered he was heir to everything. Thin, quiet, overlooked, and absolutely impossible to kill. His name was Octavian, and everyone underestimated him, which was the last mistake they ever made. At Philippi in 42 BC, Octavian and Antony destroyed Brutus and Cassius, who fell on their own swords in the dark. The last Republicans, Rome's old world ending quietly without ceremony. Octavian took the west and Antony took the east, and an agreement built on ambition began to crack from the moment it was made. Antony met Cleopatra arriving on a golden barge with silk sails and silver oars and the scent of perfume on the Nile wind. And he never really left. He abandoned his Roman wife and his Roman duties and his Roman identity, and Octavian weaponized that love with a propaganda campaign that painted him as a man bewitched by an Eastern queen who had stolen his Roman soul. Actium, September 2nd, 31 BC. The future of the world decided on open water. And in the middle of the battle, Cleopatra's ships turned and fled, and Antony saw her go and followed her, abandoning his entire fleet mid-battle and choosing love over empire. And history never forgave him for it. Mark Antony died in Alexandria with his head in Cleopatra's lap, and Cleopatra dressed in her finest robes and lay on her golden bed and chose a serpent over a Roman triumph. And the last pharaoh died as she had lived, magnificently and on her own terms. Egypt fell. Its legendary wealth flowed to Rome in a river of gold. Octavian returned as the absolute, undisputed master of the known world. January 13th, 27 BC. The Senate gave him a new name, Augustus, the Exalted One. The Republic was dead. The Empire had just been born. The Pax Romana, 200 years of relative peace. Fields growing, merchants trading, children born into a world without civil war. For a moment, Rome delivered on its promise. Professional soldiers on the frontiers. The Praetorian Guard in the city. A new army structure that would last for centuries. I found Rome a city of brick, and left it a city of marble. The Era Paces, an altar to peace, carved with the faces of his family and his dynasty and his story, because even in marble Augustus was campaigning. He had no sons. He adopted heirs, and the succession question haunted every emperor for 500 years after him. Nove Adi, Teutoburg Forest. 3 legions. 17,000 men. Ambushed in the rain over 3 days. Rome never crossed the Rhine again. Varus, Give me back my legions. The most powerful man alive broken by one defeat.
14 AD.
Augustus died in his bed after 41 years of rule. His last words, "Did I play the part well? Applaud then. The comedy is done." The Senate declared him a god. Of course they did. Tiberius sat on the throne reluctant and suspicious and alone, and the Julio-Claudian dynasty continued with each emperor stranger than the last. From Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria, all of it under one eagle.
69 AD.
The year of 4 emperors. Chaos and murder and civil war until Vespasian walked in and told everyone to sit down.
72 AD.
Construction began on something the world had never seen. An amphitheater for 50,000 people built in 8 years. We call it the Colosseum. Opening day, 100 days of games. 9,000 animals killed. Rome had built itself a monument to spectacle. 50,000 voices. One roar. Bread and the arena, Rome's gift to its people. They flooded it and built ships and staged naval battles for the crowd because Rome didn't do things by half. Lions, bears, elephants. Every animal the empire had ever conquered brought to Rome to die for someone's afternoon entertainment. Criminals executed by wild beasts. The Murmillo with his shield and sword against the Retiarius with his net and trident. 2 men, 1 sand floor, 1 would live. The emperor's hand. Thumb up. Thumb down. The difference between life and death decided by a man in purple. Trajan.
98 AD.
Soldier. Builder. Conqueror. The Dacian Wars, mountain by mountain through Romania. Rome wanted the gold mines and Trajan took them. Trajan's column stands in Rome to this day, 100 feet of carved marble, the world's first comic strip in stone.
117 AD.
The empire reached its absolute maximum. Red territory at the peak of all it would ever be. Then Hadrian looked at the map and said, "We have enough. 80 miles of stone wall across northern Britain. Here civilization ends. Beyond this line we do not go." The Pantheon, a dome that has no right to still be standing, built without steel, without computers, its oculus open to the sky for 1900 years. Hadrian's villa, pools and gardens and libraries and theaters. The man who ordered walls on the frontier lived like a god on holiday. Marcus Aurelius.
161 AD.
The man who never wanted to be emperor became the greatest of them all. Then the plague arrived. The Antonine plague sweeping through the empire like a scythe. 5 million dead. The cracks in Rome's foundation beginning to show. Marcus spent his reign at war on the frozen Danube. He didn't want to fight, he fought anyway, because that was what Rome needed. By candlelight in a military tent, the emperor wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." The Meditations, written for no one, read by everyone, forever.
180 AD.
The last good emperor closed his eyes. The golden age was over, and Rome didn't know it yet. Commodus, Marcus' son, his only biological heir, the philosopher left behind a narcissist, and Rome would pay for that for centuries. He fought in the Colosseum himself dressed as Hercules playing Gladiator for the crowd, and he always won for obvious reasons and nobody laughed for equally obvious reasons.
192 AD.
His own wrestling partner strangled him in his bath. Rome didn't mourn long. The decline had officially begun.
235 AD.
A mutiny, an emperor stabbed by his own soldiers. And Rome entered 50 years that would nearly kill it. 26 emperors in 50 years. Some lasted months, some lasted weeks. The throne of Rome became the most dangerous seat in the world. The Rhine and Danube frontiers leaked. Emperor Decius died fighting the Goths in 251 AD. The first Roman emperor to die in battle against a foreign enemy. A line had been crossed and everyone knew it. From the east came the Sassanid Persians, armored cavalry, fresh ambition, a new threat on a second frontier simultaneously.
260 AD.
Emperor Valerian was captured by the Persian king Shapur and used as a human footstool for the rest of his life. That image, carved into living rock in Persia, still visible today, tells you everything you need to know about what had happened to Roman power. In the eastern desert, a queen named Zenobia took Egypt and Syria and everything she could reach, and for a brief moment there was a third Roman Empire. The map shattered, Gallic Empire in the west, Palmyrene Empire in the east. What remained barely deserved the name Rome. The currency was debased until a lifetime of savings could not buy a month of food. The plague of Cyprian killing 5,000 people a day in Rome alone. Cities shrank. Fields went unplowed. Trade routes fell silent. Civilization doesn't collapse in a moment. It retreats, slowly, street by street. Soldier emperors rose and fell. The army made them, the army unmade them. Power meant nothing, survival meant everything. Then came Aurelian, a general's general, cold, precise, unstoppable. Restorer of the world they called him, and he earned it, reconquering the east, retaking the west, reuniting an empire that had no right to still exist in 5 extraordinary years. Then his own officers killed him. The man who saved the empire murdered by the empire he saved. He built massive new walls around Rome, 12 miles of brick and tower, and for the first time in centuries Rome's walls admitted they were afraid. More chaos, more coups, more blood. The machine ground on, exhausted, wounded, but not yet dead.
284 AD.
A soldier named Diocletian seized the purple and looked at the broken empire and said, "This ends now. For emperors instead of one, the tetrarchy, it shouldn't have worked, it worked for a while."
303 AD.
The Great Persecution. Diocletian ordered churches burned and scriptures destroyed and believers killed, the last and worst Roman persecution of Christians, and it didn't stop them. In arenas across the empire, Christians died singing, and the crowds came to watch a spectacle and saw something they couldn't explain. Below the city, in miles of tunnels, they gathered by candlelight, painted fish on the walls, whispered prayers, buried their dead.